Is it noisy? Because I have like jewelry and nails. Is it noisy to have my hands up here? Okay. I don't want to create a bunch of post-production issues for you with my
No,
Adele
I do
nails.
that for him typically. Cernich.
So close. Oh my gosh,
See?
so close.
Told you, I'm horrible with it. I forgot my name too. This sounds weird. All right. I'm Rob Blair, and I am with Stacy Cernich today. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Been doing a lot of video lately, interviewing people that are local, hyper local in our community that I feel exude success, right? I don't know if exude's a real word, but I think I'm going to use it for a while. But I've been interviewing people that I feel have success and something that that I think we can all learn from. And Stacy, as we'll learn today, is she's not in real estate and mortgage, but she's very much in our community and has had a massive impact in our community. I want to spotlight that. I want to expose that so people, within our community can see what you're doing and can rally behind you. Because I heard you talk once, and I became a massive fan. I want to be part of your journey and help however I can. And so this is why we're talking here today. And so it means a lot to me, and I know it's gonna mean a lot to people that are watching this that have a servant heart. So thank you.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. I feel like you reaching out to me, and like you were persistent with reaching out. Like I could tell right away that you saw me, saw what was going on, and wanted to know more. And that level of understanding and the willingness to show up. Like when you said thanks for showing up, like I look at showing up as this right here, right? You're showing up for me in a way that I can't do. And so deep appreciation for that.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. So if you don't mind, if you can kind of just give an overview, really who you are and what you're doing, and then we'll kind of dive deeper on, why you're doing it and what you're wanting to accomplish.
Yeah. So my name is Stacy Cernich, and I am what I kind of consider myself an accidental CEO of a food bank. That wasn't really on my radar for career path. I went to school for apparel merchandising, started working at Nordstrom at 21, worked my way up the ladder, and was working for the website and had an incredible career. I took some time off with my daughter, got involved in my community. And when I worked for Nordstrom, traveling from Bonney Lake to Seattle took about 15 hours of my day. So there wasn't a lot of time for me to know my community. And that was completely foreign to me. I think back to just, living in a community and just sleeping there, really not living there.
Right.
And so in the time that I immersed myself in the community, I began to appreciate it in a whole new way. I think sometimes kids do that for you, sometimes experience just where you're at in your life. And I think where I was at in my life, I needed to feel more connected to something. And so I found myself in schools, working with heavily impacted students and designing programming and creating what, when you sit at tables and people ask you what your power word is, I would say connection. That's my power word. And I started creating connection with students in elementary schools and connecting them to their passions and things. And I realized how gratifying that was to watch that like in real time. And so we did a service project, and I was introduced to the Bonney Lake Food Bank. It was this old building. I actually had lived in the community for 20 years, and I didn't know where it was at, which kind of embarrassed me, And so I signed up for a volunteer shift in December of 2019, and I would work on Friday evenings after I was done at school. The first shift that I worked, the building was deplorable.
It was bad.
It was really bad. You were there. How'd you?
I wasn't there. I actually drove by it and had heard through. I'm part of Sumner Rotary, so it's been brought up a couple times.
It was like legendary bad, and I actually didn't even know that the May of 2019 it had hit the News Tribune. It was about to go under. I didn't even know that part. I just, had done this project and thought it looks like they need help. And then when I was working there, I was like, how could this be this way? Like, how could this be in the shadows of our community? And I saw children in there, and it hit me in a way that, like, you can't unknow certain things. Like, my life changed in that moment. So I thought, I kind of made like a silent commitment that I was going to do something about it.
So seeing the kids in there just because of the condition of it, because
Yeah,
my
the
understanding it was
condition was, yeah, there was like
like,
an 8 by, I have a photo of it. I'll totally share with you.
okay,
And there was rickety carts that were used kind of like as makeshift grocery carts, and children were sort of riding in the undercarriage of it. And I, it was so much, like, visually, it was so overwhelming for me.
yeah,
Um, I don't feel sorry, like, when things like this happen too, because, like, my life has not been a life where I haven't seen things or been exposed to things, right? So when I don't, when I see things like that, I don't feel like sorry for people, right? Like, I don't sit there and feel sorry for anyone. Um,
yeah,
I try to connect.
yeah,
So, like, I try to connect harder. So, like, I was in like the freezer section where you would, put these, like, food that nobody else wanted that was frozen in boxes, and just tried to make the best of that situation. So, like, I would have conversations with people, I would talk with the kids, we would talk about what was for dinner, and just really focused on that because I had to.
right.
If I had thought about what was,
What they're actually eating.
yeah, just
Yeah,
what was going on, this building that was just, yeah.
yeah. It's that environment. I mean, obviously, that when you're in an environment and you're trying to make the best of it, and that could be taxing as well. And so I would imagine that was a pretty big push on. I don't want to step on your toes as far as your story, but
No.
I mean, I can see what you're saying as far as like the connection piece. If you can focus on the good,
Yeah.
regardless of the rodent droppings in those carts, right?
Right.
And the mold and everything else that's happening in that
Yeah.
situation. It's like, okay, they're here for a reason, and so you have to make that experience the best you possibly can by
Right.
connecting with them,
Right.
right? And so that's hard. It's
It
probably
is.
exhausting
But
to.
what's interesting though, because I think a lot of what I've done, since that moment is about shifting that narrative, right? Because that
Mhm.
moment wasn't about me or how heavy that was for me or how exhausting that
Mhm.
was for me. Like, it had nothing to do with me. And I also just, nobody needs the burden of my, pity on them. So, like, in any situation that I'm in, like, it's not about me ever.
Mhm.
And so that's part of that narrative shift of, like, I really just focused on connecting to human beings in a space that was anti-humane. It's not humane.
Yeah.
And so really dialing into the humanity of that moment. Um, and what I've said, like, the entire course of the pandemic, is that our project is really, the subject matter is heavy. I tend to not focus on how that impacts me. Regardless, it's heavy.
Mhm.
But probably the most, like, surreal, kind of soul jarring uh, moments that I have had during the pandemic and all that's transpired, because, like, my story, right? Like, what has happened and how we evolved that space. But what continues to be the most soul jarring for me is that when you extend dignity to a human being in a moment that they least expect it, the air changes. And, like, that is the gift, right? The gift isn't the food. The gift isn't the fancy building. The gift isn't the lockers that we're, going to put up all over the county.
Yeah.
That's not the gift. The gift is that you're a human being of value. And I just express that. And you get to interpret that however you want. And typically, how it's interpreted is you watch people, like, you watch them shift. I mean, it's like the air changes. It's the only way I can describe it.
It's an impact,
It is.
right?
Yeah.
Um, And that's something that by doing what I've been doing and talking to people like you in our community is, I mean, movement. I mean, we do mortgage, right? I do
Yeah.
mortgage to help people with the dream of home ownership. And you and I have talked online and offline a couple of times about, equity in that
Yeah.
arena as well. And there's a massive need across the board, whether that's housing, food, just human dignity, like you're talking about.
Right.
I mean, there's some massive connections there, and so Moving Mortgage is the number one impact lender in the entire world.
It's incredible.
An impact meaning we give back, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I think you and I are on. I was joking with a friend of mine, Gerald, about like we're running these races, and you kind of look over occasionally and you see that other people are running the exact same race, and it's like, we need to team up. We're running the same race, so let's help each other
Totally.
out, right? So maybe I take this leg and you take that leg,
Mm-hmm.
and that excites me, right? And that's not,
Mm-hmm.
again, it's not about me, because I
Mm-hmm.
know it's not about you either. It's how much
Mm-hmm.
impact we can have globally, but just, I mean, really in our because we want to create something that people want to emulate. We want to create something that people come into the door like, how did you do this?
Mm-hmm.
Because we want to do the exact same thing because we
Mm-hmm.
have a servant heart.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're doing with movement in the schools. I mean, there's people that are coming, billionaires, philanthropy, that coming in to the door, walking around like, how are you doing this? Because we
Mm-hmm.
want to emulate it. Because a mortgage company that is creating and building 100 schools in the next decade, that's a massive goal to try to achieve. I'm confident that we will,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The goals that you're going to talk about, I absolutely believe you're going to achieve, because you're getting people like me that have the exact same heart and vision that
Yeah.
you do. And that's what we're going to call out today, is people in our community that have the exact same passion and heart that we do to help.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to aim it and figure out, okay, she's saying exactly what I've been thinking. She's doing exactly what I want to do. And I have this influence. I have this voice. I have this capacity now to help. That's huge.
Yeah.
So with the schools, as far as being the number one impact mortgage company in the world, we've given now, we were looking last week, it's $400 million back to the community.
You guys.
400 million.
Yeah.
I had to, and I put that on my, you put on a normal calculator, it doesn't go, right? I
Mm.
mean, it's $400 million. We have 4 schools, technically 7. We have pre-K, we have 3 pre-K, 4 schools up and going.
Yeah.
And we have these kids, and I had the ability to walk into the very first one in Charlotte, and the first thing I see is, you are loved. And you
Mm.
walk around and you see stuff on the wall where it's talking about dignity, and it's talking about hope, and it's talking
Mm-hmm.
about how you're valued as a human being,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of your situation at home.
Mm-hmm.
You're home here. We love you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what resonates with what you're doing, because you're doing the exact same thing with, and you don't like to use the term food bank, and I agree, and I see
Mm-hmm.
why. And you've named it the market, which I think is amazing, because it looks like Whole Foods. I mean, it looks,
I mean, it's
it's
lovely.
beautiful. No, it's
It's
beautiful.
lovely. Yeah.
And my wife and I, when we first met you, we were in a sales meeting, and we were in the back of the room, and you're talking, and like we literally like beeline and drove right up to it, because we've driven by it a couple times, and we always had everyone we talked to, we've had the same conversation. Like, oh, that looks really nice. I'd like to go in there with shopping someday, because it's,
Mm.
so we
Yeah.
walk in, and it's all local. It's all, the produce is way nicer than stuff, in my opinion, that I'm seeing.
It's pretty.
It's
It's
amazing,
hyper local, hyper
right?
fresh. I think it's fun to like hear your impression. Well, it's fun for me to hear any community members'
Yeah.
impression of that, but also just like your take on running the same race, right? Because like what I'm finding when you disrupt industry and when you look at things differently than other people, right? Like I was looking at things differently. Like our organization was like asking different questions of the industry that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, you don't have a lot of peers, right? There's like an aloneness in that. And I don't want to say lonely. There's
Right.
an aloneness, that movement, that
Mm-hmm.
forward movement where you're just, looking at what the need is for the community and trying to keep pace with it. And I was looking from side to side and not seeing a peer with me on that. I was too busy. I looked down at the work that I'm doing, but when I did look side to side, so it has really been recently that I have had people come around me, and notably in other industries, like industries that you wouldn't think, would be like-minded, right?
Sure.
Or have different missions and different goals. But I think that was just so incredible to meet you and Alvina and just know that, there are industries that are doing the same thing. I just think that's the power in that to me, and like the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's thrilling to me. This can be like a full force assault on poverty and root cause and generational change, like an assault,
Mm-hmm.
an eradication, and that there are people that want the same thing, right? It's like, so I feel less alone, having met you and your wife.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So thanks.
Absolutely. When you have passion about something, when you're drawn to create something that doesn't exist, right? I mean, that can be lonely,
Yeah. Well,
right?
it's the ultimate risk.
It is, because you're risking more than just your livelihood or reputation or whatever else, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're also, you're vulnerable, right? You're putting yourself out
Yeah.
there to talk about things that have happened to me and what I've overcome that's created this
Mm-hmm.
passion and capacity to help.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the easiest thing to talk about, right? I mean,
Mm-mm.
people that I know that have had severe trauma, abuse, that haven't worked through it, or are suffering right now. And
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, I have a different lens to where I can see. And I mean, I have a really good friend of mine that, one of the funniest people I know, that I just looked at him one day. I'm like, who did that to you?
Yeah.
And so we have a different level of relationship. And I guess, and not to get on the personal side of things, but it's, we need more sharing. Like, look, this is what happened to me, and this is how I overcame it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's hope, right? And I also have this capacity to help you with your hope and
Mm-hmm.
heal, right? And
Mm-hmm.
because there's what we're seeing, and the reason why I think we have so much, I don't want to say headwind, but lack of understanding, is so people are so consumed with their hurt and building these walls that they don't want to let anyone else in and hurt them. A family, I could tell you right now, if I was walking through, knowing what I knew back then versus knowing what I know now, I know there would be some humility walking into a food bank with my
Yeah.
family and kids, right?
Yeah.
And so you're going to wall up, and you're probably a little bit resentment, and you're probably a little bit angry, and you're probably a little bit, because no one understands, and you feel very isolated, just like you were feeling very isolated in this race. So I've made that decision consciously to talk to anyone and everyone about whatever, even if I don't have the capacity because I haven't gone through it, at least have the empathy to understand and try to help.
Yeah.
Because I try to put that where it's not about me, it's about you and helping you, because this didn't happen to me, but it happened to you. And if I can help you get through this, you can help other people that happened to.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's cancer, whether that's PTSD, whether that's whatever, right? That's my mission and my focus. And so working with movement, helping build schools, helping stopping, essentially stopping that cycle of poverty. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really what's happening is an education platform. If these kids are moving constantly, there's no stability.
Right.
If we can keep them in there and show that they're loved and valued and show them a way, we couple that with nutrition, which we'll talk about with what you're doing.
Totally.
And then couple that as well with housing. That's how you stabilize community, and that's how you create change.
Thriving. You move
Right.
from surviving to thriving.
Right.
And like when you say that you can identify trauma in people, and when you walk through the planet and kind of, because we're all a little walking wounded, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think the deeper the trauma for folks, there is, and was a dynamic shift for me that happened mid-pandemic. There's a resiliency. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
think I necessarily notice people's trauma, but when I see resilient human beings, like I know that's an indicator, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you have had to push through something. Prior to the pandemic, I would say that my hurt, like my wounds inhibited my life, that my capacity wasn't there because, I felt like there was things I didn't know and didn't have the ability to do because of my wounds. And in the pandemic, which, everything, total plot twist, right? And in, the type of work that I do, which is a traumatic subject matter for families, and then the fear and just the unknowing of the pandemic, I realized that, like, my resiliency is my ability to push through things. There's almost a compartmentalization of that trauma. That, like, what I felt held me back in my life as a 45-year-old woman, it became my superpower in a pandemic environment. And, much of the women that work with me have that same superpower. And, there was a moment when we had kind of made it through what felt like a storm, where I just kind of acknowledged that. I was like, ladies, like, you're the only ones. Like, when we think about, like, the community and, like, the things that we had to do, the wildfires and just being in awful buildings and then moving to other buildings and not having heat, not having electricity, and all of the things to just sort of continue to show up for the community, that the women that I worked with also have resiliencies from their wounds. And had they not had them, we wouldn't have been, where we were. We wouldn't have been able to persevere. There was just too many things. And so, like, the shift for me in my brain is, like, now I don't feel like a walking wounded.
Yeah.
And that is fairly dynamic.
It's part of your healing personally.
Crazy, right?
I mean, that's,
but I don't like I'm very I am very opposed to having a secondary gain from my line of work, right? Like, I don't want to gain anything from it, because it really isn't. It isn't about that. And I know people say, oh, it isn't about that. Like, I'm relentless about that. And in people that work around me, like, this isn't about give. This isn't about charity. This is about, actualizing what we want to see in our community. I felt like, specifically in Bonney Lake, from the wildfires to civil unrest and all the things that happen, like, I remember saying to, my board and the women that worked for me, the kids are watching us. They're taking notes of how we're reacting to what's going on around us. They're watching. And, like, I want to show them what the best a community could be in a really hard time. That this is all of us. So when, the market, you can say, like, that I'm part of a team of creators of it, but, like, that's the community. It's the best of all of us right there on display on a farm in East Pierce. It's the best of all of us together. And, like, when I go to sleep at night, like, that's what I feel good about, that our community and the young people got to see that under the worst circumstances, we did the best we could, and that it's great, So I think that's the definition of resiliency, right? And now I want to move over to, I want to talk about vitality now, like community vitality. That's where that shifts in. Yeah. I'm not satisfied. We got to keep going.
But see, that's, and take it as you will. I'm giving it as a compliment, but there's characteristics in people that I see. And I think the best way to describe that is spirit, right? So the resiliency that you've shown, and then you're also emulating for the kids to see, okay, we survived that. Okay, we can weather that, right? Whatever that is. And I'm huge on analogies, and I'm huge on, like, with my two boys, it's kind of an inside joke in our home that I give these long lecture speeches when they make a mistake, but I'm trying to give them analogies, so, because I understand people are going to understand things at different levels based on wherever they're at, so I'm trying to hit them. I've pivoted a little bit because I'm just going to show them. I'm going to show them my good days. I'm going to show them my bad days. I'm going to do interviews with amazing people like you, that when I'm dead and gone, that they can see and watch and learn from. Cool. and my grandkids can see and watch and learn from. Like, this is how we connect. This is humanity. This is how, whether you're spiritual or not, this is what God wanted, right? Is helping each other out. We're in this group. It's fellowship. At the end of the day, that's really what it is. And so, yeah, we're resilient. We can take that. Okay, now we're going to thrive, right?
Yeah.
Time to thrive. Okay.
Yeah.
We've done the work. We've planted the seeds, and now we're going to harvest this. But we're going to thrive through this, and that's what I feel like is just kind of happening. It's happening with me personally. It's happening with me business wise. It's happening with me spiritually. It's like there's so many different levels that I'm starting to see things come out of the ground because I've put so much work into tilling and tending to and taking care of myself and other people that, okay, I can now start to enjoy the fact that I know I can take the shot. I know I can get kicked in the stomach. I know I can get, hit in the face. I can take all these shots, right, and keep going. And it's, cliche as far as like, keep on, you get knocked down 8 times, you get up, 9 type thing. Okay, yeah, we're resilient. We can prove that, and we've shown that. And so during times of despair and what was happening during the pandemic, people were looking for that. They were looking for stability, and you provided it. Same with us. When everything was shut down, we still offered food to the students because that's probably all the food that they had. I mean, and that's just basic human dignity, right? That's human rights. It's like, let's just feed people. Let's just help them because there's so many things. They're not working. They're already struggling anyways. Borderline homeless. What's happening? So we're not going to feed them just because everything's shut down.
Our society, this concept, the common good. Like, I'm just completely obsessed with this notion of the common good and like how it relates to, in all industries there is, there's things that are known that you can expect from the post office to your kids' schools. Like, what you can expect in some ways. Food and housing, that there doesn't really seem to be like standards that we can all agree on. It gets a little convoluted.
Well, there isn't much to even talk about. I mean, it's like should just be, right?
It should just be.
Right.
And yet it's up to debate a lot.
Right.
And value systems, get sort of intertwined. And we want to talk about our experience with all of these things. And in reality, like, to me, that's just such a moot point. Like, it just should be. It just should be. And I'm operating in an industry where we're trying to meet those needs. I have a different take on it, right? Like, I'm trying to explore like what are the standards, and then, like, by the way, let's raise them real high. Matter is the minimum. It's the minimum.
Right.
Yeah, I think I often talk about, so I was saying, like, I'd volunteered at the food bank, right? So I saw this and I thought, I'm going to activate the teachers in the school that I work. We're going to get down here. We're going to clean this place up. And I was looking on the Facebook page and I noticed that they were hiring. And I was not intending on leaving my job at the school and working, with students on, sort of outcome driven programming and things that I was doing. And I looked at it, and it was December 31st of 2019. And I hit send on it. Like, I just hit send. I sent my resume, and I just thought, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to see what happens. Like, that felt like a huge risk for me because I was still sort of like in a moment of healing and trying to like figure things out. And I felt like, the schools and what I was doing with kids was paramount until I saw the food bank, and it just shook me. Like, I couldn't unshake it. And so I, was in an interview process that was like super rigorous because the board of directors wanted to improve. I mean, they had almost closed down a couple months before. And so this was the Hail Mary, like this interview process. And you could feel that this was the Hail Mary. They had assembled a group of community members that had been in the industry in HR and just extensive professional histories from the Tahali and Trilogy neighborhoods. And they ate me for breakfast. Like,
Really?
yeah, it was cool. I remember telling them, like, I've been in several Fortune 500 interviews. I've never had anything as rigorous as this.
Wow.
I wanted it more. I
So, oh, it's like a good thing, right? They
Oh,
want,
I
oh,
wanted it
okay.
more.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I was being challenged, and I thought,
Yeah.
oh, yeah,
My time to
like,
shine, right?
touche.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
And so I, like, 3 interviews in, and I still couldn't really tell, like, if I was the lead candidate. They told me later that it was always me.
Hmm.
So, you know, it felt like I was supposed to be there. I went in, like, to every interview thinking, I must have this. And it was so, like, that's not like me, right? Like there was just something that I couldn't explain. I was so driven. I wanted it bad. I wanted to change some things. So, like, I knew that I was going to make some changes. I knew that, right? So I get the job, and I go to meet my board president at a coffee shop, and he's giving me sort of like a formal onboard. And I stand up after an hour of hanging out with him and talking, and he's a Oklahoman, and we just,
Right.
just enjoyed each other's company. It's the first time I'd met him, right? And I get up and I'm like putting on my jacket, and it's February, late February, and I said, hey, we're just getting to know each other, and all that, and I'm learning about the organization. My husband's following this thing over in China, and it doesn't look good.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, yeah, I've been following it on Twitter. And I was like, he's super smart dude. And I was like pretty bad. And he said, yeah. And I said, we're probably going to, like, sooner than later, we need to, like, talk about, like, contingency plans and sort of emergency plans and all of that. And he said, yeah, let's schedule something for next week. And within 10 days, the pandemic hit. And it was just, like, otherworldly, right? So we, get through, we expand rapidly because we religiously, just were in pursuit of equitable access to food. Like, I knew that things were going to get hard, a lot harder before they got better. And I thought to myself, like, I've lived in this community for 20 years. People are going to need to come here that have never had to do anything like this before.
Right.
And I'm probably going to know them. And they're going to have to tell me the hardest thing you'll ever have to tell another human being. And that's that you can't feed your kids.
Yeah.
You can't feed your family. And I felt so devastated by that was going to happen, because I knew it. Like, I knew that, supply chains were going to break down, that industries, so I messaged Jensen, who's a tech CEO, and I just said, hey, this is going to be really bad. And I need to protect people from what I know will be very traumatic for them. Like, I need for us to figure something out. If there's a way, because we all know, right? Like, when the first time you have to say something to another human being that changes the rest of your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's so traumatic that, that feeling where you choke it out.
Right.
The first time you have to say, I can't feed my family, you're going to just choke over that. And the trauma lives in that. There's trauma in the subsequent, like, after that. But I think what really sticks is that moment that you had to reveal that to another human being.
Mm-hmm.
So I explained that to Jensen, and I was like, we need to stop that. And we're literally in a building that it felt like you could, like, go like that and it would push over, right?
Right.
So I had a lot of other things to be worried about, but I was really worried about that. And he said, yeah, no problem. And we got a broadcasting app called Avocado. We've since been a case study for it.
Okay.
So we started texting out in every language, knowing that, language, transportation, all of these things were barriers.
Mm-hmm.
And shame, the biggest barrier of all.
Right.
And so to this day, there are people that we served that I will never know that we served. They might be my next door neighbor. But that anonymity and that ability to tell me that they, needed something via text. So much easier.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to choke over that. Still hard. But they got to remain anonymous and still have that need met. Like, so cool.
Part
I
of the
mean,
dignity piece too, right?
it's
I mean,
huge.
yeah.
That's huge. So, I mean, we did clean up the building and, cleaned up all the vehicles and did all that. It was crazy.
So when did you move from that location to the new one, which is absolutely beautiful?
Yeah.
I mean, it's beautiful.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
So we, so it was September of 2020.
Okay.
And so late, like the wildfires had happened. It was post wildfire.
Okay.
Got an opportunity through a friend of a friend to lease on this property, and I'd actually driven by it. This was kind of crazy. I was on a delivery route because at that point, so we'd started this delivery. We were delivering to like 1,000 people every week because that was dignity, like home delivery.
Right.
I knew people couldn't come to that building. We couldn't do that. I also knew that if I did have people come to that building, we would shut down the main thoroughfare of Bonney Lake proper every day. And like that in and of itself was traumatizing. I didn't want to do that. It's not even like I was even less scared of the impact to traffic as I was that like our neighbors would have to see their friends and neighbors in a bread line in their vehicle.
How many people do you serve a day?
At our height, 200 families. And so like 4,500 individuals every week. Our delivery route was about 1,200 a week.
Okay.
And, all across the East Pierce Plateau and just reaching into the valley. And it's crazy. So the farm I saw on a delivery route, and my customer had texted me and said, oh honey, I won't be there when you get there. I'd like to say hi. And I thought, when somebody says that, right, like they're asking for that, they want to have that connection with you. So I was like, oh no, that's no problem. And I kind of drove around a little bit, and I had driven by the farm, and I thought, I've always wanted to pull in there. I'm going to pull in there now. And it was for sale, but it was under contract. I didn't know that. And so I pulled in, and the back door had been kicked in, and I walked in, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is the food bank. Like this is it. And it was in rough shape, but I was like, this is it. And so I relentlessly pursued how I could figure out how to get into that space.
Some people call it stalking. I mean,
So,
that's kind of what I was doing to you.
Who knows? Details. But so we get the space, and we started just like, I didn't feel like we had any business doing like a full-blown capital campaign when like rapidly every industry from, transportation to restaurant business, like people were losing their jobs. And so we did just a very quick relocation campaign to see if we could raise some money to get out there. And we raised about $50,000, which, I mean, today that project's worth $1 million, but so we had, a humble amount of money to get relocated. And I knew that, we needed capacity. I needed safety. The building I was in had black mold. Our kids were trying to do their homework there. We all had lung conditions. Like we had to get out of there. Yeah. And I knew moving out to the farm that there would be an immediate narrative shift, right? And that I was going to get to watch that unfold. Like that, even now I think about that and I'm like, how exciting, right? That like we would change the game a little bit. I knew that people would like the look of it when we started remodeling. Like who wouldn't want something, that looks like Magnolia Farms, hanging out in East Pierce. I knew that people would like the looks of it. What I really wanted to have happen was that as our story unfolded, that people would also feel more connected to where food comes from and like how food banks could play a role in that in our communities. So like our original intention, and I've said this before, like we ask a lot of questions as an organization. I personally ask a lot of questions. So like the original question that I have, and that, you know, I have found the answer to, which we found an answer to within a year. The original question was, if, you know, what might happen if a child, and any child in our community, might not ever know that they had been to a food bank. I run into people all the time that tell me their trauma, the shame of going to a food bank. And I thought, what would that be like if we eradicated that for an entire community? What could that look like? And I've watched that unfold in real time of what that looks like, you know?
Yeah. I saw it firsthand, and seeing, and I'm probably stepping on your toes a little bit here, but the thing that was amazing for Alvina and I when we walked in was it's local, right? It's sustainable, as far as like you have local farmers that are bringing food in, right? And I guess can you kind of touch on that as far as your vision there, because I think that's massive. That's something that you don't see in food banks, because you mentioned before, it's like the food that was coming out of like the freezer section was not right, and everything else, but it's, so you're trying to connect with people to where it's like you don't want to look at what they're going to be eating, but now it's like, look at what you're eating. This is amazing.
It's amazing.
You know, so can you kind of explain how you, because that's an amazing vision, that's sustainable, where it's also helping other local business farmers, right? With, I mean, that's
and those are like the next gen questions that we're asking, is right. Like my question now is, can a food bank mean more to a community than just the obvious, right? Just the obvious of the emergency.
I think
food.
You're proving that it does.
I think I've got to come up with some more questions, I guess. But I think, you know, the thing that really bothered me as a volunteer at the food bank was it looked like the food was refuse. So it looked like food that nobody else wanted, right?
Right.
And it's beyond disrespect, right? Like you are showing somebody that you as a human being, I don't value you enough to even ensure that you have food that looks like food. Right?
Yeah.
And so when the pandemic hit, you know, supply chain issues and grocery stores immediately, when you work in the food banking industry, you are quite literally at the bottom of the food chain. So any types of fluctuations in the economy and supply chain, whatever, we immediately feel it at the food bank. Right. And so immediately everything was shut off. And I had a family right before we started our delivery route. So we started our delivery 2 weeks into the pandemic. In that 2-week period of time, some things happened that are more of that. You can't unknow that. And a family in a beautiful pickup truck. And you could see which industries were completely imploding. And so, you know, there was like restaurant workers, and then it would be like transportation, and then construction workers. And so this gorgeous vehicle with the tools in the back had a family of 6, and they had never had to go to a food bank. And, you know, you could deeply ashamed. And that's such a like primal thing to feed your children. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's like beyond shame, right? Like it's like, and so, I only had a pack of bacon to give them for protein. And I was like, I don't accept this. I remember thinking to myself, I don't accept this. And we started a fundraising campaign where we asked the community, and I said, okay, look, I'm not great at asking for help. And I'm very conversational with our community, the community that we serve through the doors, and the community that, you know, walks beside us to make all this happen. But I was like, okay, so I'm not great at asking, but, you know, here it goes. I can't accept what's happening right now. and I need some help. And if you are able to help right now, and not everybody is able to help right now, but if you are, if you invest in us right now, I will take that money and I will put it back locally. I will make sure that, dairy and meat businesses that are, have restaurant and school contracts that have just,
Right.
they were up in smoke, right? Like done. That I'll invest right back into them. And I have a picture that I'll also share of like what that looked like. It felt like overnight. It felt like such relief, just beautiful, gorgeous, healthy food, whole wheat breads and, dairy and eggs. And that was a shift for me, knowing that I could activate our community in change that really impacted a family. Like, I can give them chicken McNuggets and mac and cheese, right?
Right.
But providing people, like, that's the ultimate dignity, that
Right.
your wellness, I actually value you as a human being so much that I value your health. And when you look statistically at disparities, health disparities with underserved populations, we have all that, heart disease, obesity,
Right.
diabetes. We know that, but like, there's not a lot of activation around that. That really bugs me. And so this was a way, like in a grassroots way, that we could totally move the mark and kind of design what that could look like. There's power in that. And in fact, I think that is like when you say like that saying, like, never underestimate the power of a small group of, individuals. I'll totally slaughter the quote that they can change the world. Indeed, it's the only way.
Right.
The world has been changed, right? Like, that's the way. That's Margaret Mead, like, I'm so inspired by that because it really is a collective group of people proving that there's different paths, that there are narratives that you can. I love shape shifting and just completely flipping that around. And so, the other incredible thing that happened in June, we were still in the old building, and I had applied for this like contract where Pierce County Economic Development had put forth this thing where they had activated, which was so cool, and worked with Tacoma Farmers Market, because when farmers markets
Right.
blew up, right, and there's a horrible statistic out there that I will share. So the industry, the occupation with the highest suicide rate in our country is a farmer.
Really?
And they took the lead in that by a long shot during the pandemic. So there's no more farmers markets. There's no way for these individuals. Meanwhile, the food supply chain is breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
And here are these local people that can be producing but can't sell it. And the Tacoma Farmers Market got together, wrote CARES Act funding, purchased food, put it on trucks, got it to food banks on these trucks. And so I had applied for it, not really realizing, and I had been doing like a lot of grocery store rescue and stuff where it was just like the stuff that people didn't want kind of thing. And so when I almost didn't believe it was true. It pulls down Veterans Memorial Drive. There's the Tacoma Farmers Market refrigerated truck. They pull up next to the building. And we had, we had home delivery, but not everybody has a home. And so we had a drive-through at that time. Okay. And also somebody might not want you to know where their home is, and that's okay too. So we had a crisis drive-through. So it was going on at the same time. I run to the truck because I think, is this real? They open up the back, and it was fresh, local, gorgeous food. And it, the same sort of thought, like when I went to the farm site and said, this is it. When I was standing in the driveway looking at this, I was like, I remember the phrase in my head was, why hasn't it always been this way? Why hasn't it always been this way? Mm-hmm. And I grabbed, there was these gorgeous Spooner berries, and they had blackberries, blueberries, and like piles of them as tall as me, like bounty. And so I pulled one of each of the berries. I ran over to the drive-thru, and we had a woman we were loading up the back of her vehicle. And I went right over to the side of her car and I go, look. And she looked at him and she said, oh my goodness, honey, those are beautiful. And I said, aren't they? Here you go. And, like the exchange, I'm not really into the give, right? Like the giving, like that doesn't do much for me. Just access does something for me. And so like having her look at it and just, She said, "What?" And I said, "Look, that truck brought this, and you're here at just the right time, and these are yours." And she said, "What?" And she said, "I don't know which one I want. They're so beautiful." And I go, "You don't have to choose. They're all yours." Burst into tears. Like, that wasn't in her wildest imagination that day. And like, to me, that is just so, like, all people should have access. And like, it really clicked to me that not all people can have fresh, beautiful foods.
Right.
And here we have all these farmers that want to feed people, and the industry is imploding. And like, what? So that was like another activation moment for me, where I'm like, I'm putting these things together, and I'm not. So fast forward, federal grants became available, and through the WSDA. And so we have been able to really, optimize and go after these funding pools, and have been able to get enough money. Like, this year, I'm so excited about this. Half of our operating budget goes to locally purchased foods that are produced right here in our area. That's $700,000.
Wow.
And like, I could probably use another building and a truck, and those things would have made our life a little bit easier right now.
Right.
But it wasn't the most important thing to me, to our community.
Right.
So being able to provide access to the best of local foods and nutrition to our customer, and stabilize the economy through this purchasing, like, it's just like Jensen and I talk about it all the time. It's a virtuous circle.
Right. Well, and when we were talking the other day, you were talking about like acquiring like tons of like fresh chicken.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think you guys know how creative you really are. Because I mean, you said it the other day. It's like the largest kitchens we have in our community are at the schools.
Right.
Right. So how do we plug that in to where now you have students that are learning how? I mean, it's part of the education process as well. But now they've created a brand.
Right.
They actually have their own branding, and they're roasting and flash freezing these chickens and turkeys and everything, and then it's amazing. It's like it's mind blowing, because I shouldn't say it's mind blowing. It's just amazing. The mind blowing, or the thing that just it kind of takes me back, is like you're going from something that in a short amount of time you went from, like, you're trying to connect with people to allow them to have dignity and make it the best possible experience in a situation that is not good, both physically because of the environment, emotionally, spiritually, everything, right? To now you have something that is really desired by anyone and everyone, but it's for people that don't feel like they deserve it sometimes, maybe, or in a situation,
or just simply can't afford it. I mean, that's our nation. Like, what we need to understand, this big message, like, it's not that people don't want to be healthy.
Right.
It's that they simply can't afford it.
And that's like the produce. You go to the produce section. I mean, we're dropping $60 every time we go, just to get fresh anything.
Right.
And that doesn't really get you very far.
No.
You go, on the perimeter of the grocery store is where the healthy things are, and that's where it's the most expensive. So the fact that you're connecting people with these people that grow locally, and it's sustainable, and now you're also, that's what I want. That's success.
It's
to
so
me. That's
beautiful.
what I want.
It's so beautiful. Like, that is vitality. That's community vitality.
Right.
So that's, we kind of took that leap into that, and like, we went all in. We went all in, because like, there's also, like, you can't unknow that either. For me, there's a lot that you can't unknow. And so putting those connections, and here's the thing, like, yes, we did it, and we will continue to do it and forge new trails that way. But there is capacity in all humans to do that. I think that we all want to do good.
Right.
We all desire to do good. And that there needs to be, like, as a society, like, we need to hold more space for that. For strategic risk taking and looking for opportunities for connection and, pursuing the good, even when there's no roadmap for
Right.
that, doing it anyway,
Right.
because people want to do good.
Well, and that's something that our CEO Casey Crawford has said. I mean, countless times. He's like, we're a mortgage company that's building schools. We're in the business of building schools.
Right.
We see where there's a need, and that we have to. I mean, it's an obligation. Like it's brought to your attention. You can't unsee it. Just like what you're saying, right? This is how we stop it. And we hope and pray that other companies, organizations, within mortgage, outside mortgage, sees that that corporate culture that is giving back and building something that's sustainable, because it's like it's almost going so much that you just can't stop it.
Yeah, it snowballs
Right.
in the best way, and the impact of that
Right.
is just, also, like, as you do work like that, understanding that there are ripples that you might not ever see.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's so
Yeah.
cool. So incredible to see folks in the private sector, like movement, really pursuing that and asking more questions about how they can improve communities. Because, like, securing food, when I was talking at John F. Scott, securing food and securing housing, like, that's what creates successful communities. We are, all flourishing is mutual.
Right. Yeah. I often say it's like, we depend on our community, right? So we rely on our community. We want to give back to our community, but if we're not taking care of our community, there is no community. So we don't exist. I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship. Absolutely. So, and a friend of mine, he's actually with Movement Mortgage as well, Ryan Hills. He talks about the lighthouse effect.
Yeah.
Right. So you're up there, and it can be very lonely, and you're taking this on, and you're weathering those storms and those waves, and you may hear of, like, okay, we saved that ship, but you don't know how many ships you've actually saved by right. And that's why I've kind of taken this idea, this role of talking to people like you and doing these podcasts, is because it needs to be said, it needs to be heard. And if I have the platform, if I have the capacity to share stories and help grow the community and improve the community, then that's my duty. That's what I have to do, and I want to do it. I enjoy doing it. And what you're doing locally, involving the schools, getting students involved, doing that aspect of it, is next level. You're also teaching kids how to build business, branding. I mean, that's the lighthouse effect.
And we're just getting started on
that,
right?
I
Like,
know.
that to me is so, and, like, we kind of touched a little bit on it, but, like, when we talk about the common good, there's a lot of factors. There's, social equity and access, and removing barriers and being relentless about those things. Food waste reduction is on the list for me, right? So in the state of Washington, we produce food 365 days a year. There really should not be hunger. It shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, you told me that stat. What is it? 40? Is it?
Yes, it's like 40% waste.
So 40% of food produced in the state of Washington is wasted.
Yeah, we better do the Goog on that before we publish it out to the universe.
Okay,
but
a lot of the food.
So much food is wasted.
Right.
Yeah, things are rotting in fields, and even food that has been harvested and is in warehouses and trucks and, moving across. And that's Washington. That's the entire country, right? We waste a lot of food. There is a stat, like 60% of what we purchase at the store, we end up wasting in our own homes when we can't afford food, right? So scarcity isn't really about the lack of food. It's something different. Right. And so really looking and sort of disseminating that and saying, are there actionable items here that we as a community on a grassroots level can activate on? And for us, I don't know, I don't come up with all these ideas, right? Like, I don't need to be the expert on all of these things. I create environments where people feel invigorated by creating change. That's my specialty, because I don't even know how to cook. That's my, and I haven't done my own grocery shopping in 20 years.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not the expert on food. I think I might be a human expert.
Yeah.
But so when one of my employees, the incredible Janahina, she is our food steward. So I have the world's only, food bank food steward. Those don't really exist.
That's awesome.
But that's our commitment to preserving and cultivating gorgeous food where, on one part, we want to make sure that anybody that walks into the food bank, whoever they are, whatever color they are, whatever their culture is, that they walk in and they feel represented. Mm-hmm. They feel represented in the space, right?
Yeah.
So there's that part that she helps curate for us. But then the other part is a lot of food waste happens. And so if we get a pallet of squash, I'll just use this as an example. Sure. So we get a pallet of squash, we know that we can distribute half that pallet immediately before, while it's in its peak. We take off what we know we can distribute and put the rest on a van, and it heads down to every community's biggest kitchen, which is at the school. Right. So it goes to the loading dock. It gets unloaded. It becomes part of their programming. And so super cool for me. Mm-hmm. I employed a food steward, and she's married to, the culinary arts instructor of the Bonney Lake High School, Kale Ahina, for, also 20 years they've been married and lived in this community. So he is as committed, to food waste reduction as Jen and our organization. And they create squash soup. They freeze it. They put the kids' logo on it. Mm-hmm. It transports 3 miles down the road and goes right into our freezer. And like, we have customers asking us, like, there's meatloaf, eggplant, Parmesan, rotisserie chicken, like all of these gorgeous foods that would have been in dumpsters.
Right. It's unreal.
It's crazy cool.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Can you, and we'll wrap this up, but I wanted to have you kind of touch on the technology aspect of it, which is also kind of, it's bleeding edge in my opinion, because I don't see any other, I guess I shouldn't say that. I don't know if it exists out there or not, but it was shocking to me. And one of those where it's like, I think what you're doing is going to be mimicked, and people are going to want to do the exact same thing and even compound on that, which
I hope so.
I hope so as well. Right. And that's exactly where, cause
that's the point,
right? The servant heart, right? So please, more people,
please. Help. Yes.
If you have better ideas, more efficient, if you have relationships, if you know someone that wants to do this or in your area, here's the playbook.
Run. In fact,
right.
Do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So on the technology piece, as far as, again, dignity and meeting people where they need to be met. I think I'll let you explain as far as the food lockers, because I think it's brilliant. I guess tell us about the food lockers.
I think everybody's seen an Amazon parcel locker, and then some stores like Kroger and Walmart, I think they have your neighborhood grocery store probably has a refrigerated food locker. People ask me all the time, where did this idea come from? How did this happen? And it's like, well, they exist. They've existed. This technology has existed. Nobody has applied it to the demographic that I'm applying it to. Right. So like, I have this kind of saying that I say a lot, that convenience is never afforded to those that cannot afford it, and shouldn't be the opposite. Shouldn't, when you're just trying to survive, having somebody offer you one thing that's convenient. It is a full-time job to be in poverty in this country. You almost can't work just to get the services that you need to survive. Not just like good to have services, like food, shelter, medicine, right? Yeah. And so providing one thing in somebody's life that is convenient. And so we found that with the delivery. We found that with the text app that we ran 24/7. We're answering messages for folks in any language. The delivery, also not revolutionary, right? Neither is a broadcasting app. Your dentist uses that. Nobody's applied it to the demographic that we've applied it to. So I don't claim to be like a total genius. I mean, my board president is very tech savvy, and we engineered a solution that, I mean, we engineered dignity, like through tech. And that's where, like, I talk about like these gaps, and like in communities, we all need to be building safety nets, and they have to overlap each other, right? Because then there's no gaps. In an ideal world, there wouldn't be gaps, but there are. And so many people quietly fall through them. And we have to be paying attention more to that. We have to be paying attention more to that. We have to be noticing that more. And so, like, the project and the work that we do is really like our expression of that I noticed. And so the delivery lockers, they're smart lockers. They are, 24/7, a automated grocery pickup station, refrigerated. They can heat food, they can freeze food, they can be ambient. You can pick up, diapers, in the future, a hot meal, and then your groceries, just a button. And so somebody will register to get an order and pick it up later after work, or after they pick their kids up from school, or a convenient time for them, right? Which is none of my business what is a convenient time for somebody. We try to factor ourselves out of that, right? Like, it's like whenever you can make it here is good, and we give a lot of grace on all sides of that. And so they will set up their grocery delivery pickup, and with a QR code, they just grab it and put it in their car, and that's it, right? Like the ultimate, like, we have a gorgeous food bank. It is gorgeous. But I think the ultimate expression of dignity, right, is that you get to be anonymous. You still have the dignity of choice. Many food banks across the state are still not open for people to come in and shop. I was the first one, June of 2021. We opened our doors when everything else opened up, and we were one of the only ones in the state that did that. We remain to be there's a very small handful. There's not a lot of food banks where people can just shop, right? So, like, think about that, not being able to choose the food that you eat. And I get asked a lot. So I'm considered innovative in our industry because I've had a shopping model for, since June of 2021, right? On a farm and all that, right? But I've been asked before, well, how did you do that? And I say, well, I just opened up the door. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of baggage and insert value systems and all kinds of things in food. To me, food is food. Food is about celebrating. Food is a language we all speak together. Bounty, not scarcity. And so the lockers is just an extension of this, of creating other opportunities so that people don't fall through gaps. Working parents, older adults that aren't ready to come into buildings yet. That's covering all of our bases. And also, like, you don't have to be any of those fragile demographics. You might just want the convenience of it. And that's great too.
You're maybe working 2 jobs and you need to be able to pick up a hot meal. Right. And you can't go to the food bank, or there's that. So if you can do it between jobs on the way home, picking up the kids, it's that dignity piece.
And when 40% of the food goes into the dumpster, why are we so concerned about why somebody needs or doesn't need food? So, like,
you're right. That shouldn't be like, you're hungry, then let me feed you. Right. I mean, that shouldn't be like, well, why? What are you doing? It's like, it's food.
So, like, I don't believe that we have a scarcity issue. I believe we have a logistics issue. I believe we have some hangups around food and housing that need to get lifted and kind of rethought. And the only way, like, I kind of call ourselves, like, I call us a quiet riot, right? Like, because really, I've seen some things. I'm an outsider that got into an industry that, an accidental CEO. Here I am, doing this work, and there's some things that make me pretty mad. And I could be pretty mad about that, but that wouldn't get the job done. The best way to get the job done because I do believe people are good, is to show the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it opens up doors in minds that were closed or thought a certain way, like changing your perceptions. Like the building on 410 and anything else, that we create, I call it all the time. It's one part love letter to our community. Like, this is the best we could do. And gosh darn it, like, it was really good.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really good best. This was the best we could do in a hard time. So it's my love letter back to the community, but it's also a dare. It's equal parts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the quiet riot.
See, that's that spirit I was telling you about that I picked up on. Like, yeah. And I love it. I love what you're doing. I love your spirit. When I first heard you talk, we were at John L. Scott, and Derek invited you in. And Derek and his wife Emily they're amazing people. They could give them back, and I can say I'm guilty of, because I don't understand the need.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of, well, yeah, I do stuff with Sumner Rotary and the Sumner Food Bank, and do a food drive every year, we look forward to that. It's the kids and their friends, and we make them run to the doors. We can do all this stuff.
Totally.
We weigh all the food, and it's in nicer neighborhoods, and it's good food, and but I always and this is something where it's like, I don't know why I never really asked any more questions, but we do that once a year. People need food every day.
Every day.
Right. So it's great. I mean, so that's maybe a pat on my back for that day. Like, look how much, a couple thousand pounds of food. That's a big impact around Thanksgiving. But what about the next day and the next week and the next month and everything else? And so that's why I'm absolutely in love with what you're doing, as far as just bringing in other aspects of the community that can actually give back and create things that don't exist, just like we're creating things that don't exist in schools.
Yeah.
Right. And when I was at that meeting on Tuesday, I don't know if you saw me because you were talking, but I literally I had this smile on my face, and you've probably, and not to get on a spiritual side of things, but or overly religious, but you've probably heard the question, if you had the opportunity to ask God one thing, what would you ask him? And probably the last decade, with some trauma that I've gone through with the passing of my mom and father-in-law and friends and illness and all these other things, is, why them? And then it got to the point where it's like, okay, why me? And then I did some healing, moved past a lot of things, and my eyes were opened, right? It's like one of those things that you just can't unsee. And I realized that, okay, it doesn't matter about me. So if I can get through this, if I can get past this, if I can get strong enough, if someone was going to ask me that question again, what would you ask God? For the last couple of years, it's been, how? How can I help? This is not about me.
Right.
Monday, before our Tuesday meeting, because I feel like, okay, I kind of know how now, right? I'm doing these interviews, I'm talking to people, and people kind of come out of the woodwork that for whatever reason they start telling me things, and I'm pouring into them. I'm helping them to the best of my capacity, whether that's trauma, cancer, getting into homes, whatever that is, right? It's like, okay, I'm gonna take this on, and that's not always the easiest thing, but it's okay. I asked how I can help, so this is the best I can do. I'm on the treadmill at home Monday morning, and whatever reason, it's like that analogy of, what would you ask God, kind of came up again. I was like, okay, well, who? Tuesday morning, you walk in the door.
Yeah. Wow.
So I say that because it's like, okay, whether you're believing that or not, I do, and it's like, okay, I'm put in these situations, you're put in these situations because we have to do it, right? I mean, it's profound. It's provident, in my opinion, that we're
Yeah,
across the table from each other right now talking about how we can help more people.
totally.
I'm just a lone officer in Puyallup, Washington, trying to get people in the homes and make a living for my family and do the right thing.
Mm.
You're a CEO of a food bank, right? But we're so much more than that. We're bringing in all of our personal experiences and all of our personal
Oh,
passions to create an actual change and be an impact. I want to be the number one. We're already the number one impact lender in the world. I want to be the number one impact loan officer in the world.
hmm,
It's not based on volume and all these closed loans or whatever. I mean, that stuff comes and goes, whatever. That doesn't really, I mean, it excites me, but it doesn't excite me. It excites me because I know that a portion of that, those proceeds are going back so we can build more schools, right?
totally.
And you coming in today and sharing and being vulnerable, I think is going to impact a lot of people. So I applaud you for that, and I appreciate you as a human, and I consider you a friend.
Yeah,
And this is an amazing race we're going to run. And it might be uphill a little bit. It might be, hey, we got easy stuff, but whatever that is, we're running it together, and we need more and more people. And that's really what I want to call it today. Is like there's just two of us here, and there's some other people that I've talked to that are absolutely behind us, and those are connections that I'm going to bring to the table as well, which we've kind of talked about offline.
which I'm
But
so like when you talk about like your timing and like that that serendipitous, I'm just um thank you for sharing that. Like,
yeah,
I think for me, in this, we're in a situation right now where there is more need than there was at the beginning of the pandemic.
yeah,
People are trying to recover and are just taking blows. Like when you were talking about just taking hits, like people all over our area are experiencing, just hikes in their, rent and gas hit everybody. I mean, just the impact of that when
mm-hmm,
you're already living paycheck to paycheck
yeah,
is profound, right? And so, there is this almost like our society is like, well, the pandemic's over and we're all kind of like picking ourselves back up. And like the understanding that not everybody is in that place right now. Like we all had a very different pandemic experience. Not everybody is picking themselves up right now.
right,
There are people that are receiving their first blow.
mm-hmm,
And, that can, be that can be hard to think about because we all definitely want to move on, but that's very much where we are right now. And I believe that that there's more to come.
mm-hmm,
And I think that what I know now that I didn't know in the beginning was that our ability to activate as a community is expansive. Like I believe in it.
mm-hmm,
And I had, our organization, myself personally, we have received some blows. And so when I said I felt like somebody handed me a lifeline, I had conversations that week where I had talked to my board president and I talked to my VP. And, when you're doing work that nobody else is doing, you have no benchmarks. You have no peers, you have no benchmarks.
right,
You don't even know if you're on the right path sometimes. So you're flying blind all the time and you're still building the plane in the air while you're flying blind. It's compounding, right?
yeah,
And so I had said, there are just things that we are trying to push through. And I was like, I've said it to my team on the ground, and then my incredible team, my executive team, I just said, this is when ordinary people would quit. This is when that would happen. Like we're in those moments right now. Normal people would say, this is too much.
yeah,
This is too much. And so, like, having somebody hear what I was saying about our community, and then it's brave, right? It's brave to say, I'm a lender and I don't know exactly what I can do, but I'm going to figure it out. And I have said, to whether it's a huge entity in our state or, you know, people that want to be part of what we do, because I think everybody wants to be part, right? But I think, what I want to challenge the greater community, I have had people tell me in this work that is very much like there is an element of strategic risk taking all the time, right? That people have said, well, we'll love to watch and see how this goes out. And I say, I that is great. I would love for you to watch and support. Right now, I'm trying to recruit people that already have their suit on, like they're suited up for the game.
Yeah.
That's who, if we really want our communities to be not just resilient, but thriving, beautiful communities, that takes the work of the entire community. Everybody has to be suited up.
Yeah.
And so, that's my all call. I'm still willing to take the risk. I'm still willing to be the fall guy for it, for sure. No problem.
Yeah.
I'm used to it now. But I definitely am looking for, in this next leg of, doing sort of uncharted work, who are going to be the people on my team.
Right.
So I appreciate you coming. You already had your jersey on. That is rare. I will tell you that is rare, because you can look at, some of these things. And I think a lot of times people think there's nothing I could add to that, or that's too good. They must have it all figured out. But I would want to tell people, I don't have it figured out. I don't even know what I'm going to do every day to move the mark, right? And so some people, are, when we don't know something, right, there is an aversion to it. You don't want to look like a fool, right? But the culture of who we are is try first. And then it doesn't work, we keep going, right? And so having people willing to walk through that with me would be the most incredible gift, to our organization, as we start to figure out how are we going to take all these things we know about local farmers and create a way that it's not just sustaining for our community, but the market itself self-sustains through that enterprise. How do we take, private sector, and we all work together with these great brains from all these different industries and figure out how do we activate and maintain this for an entire community for generations? Yeah. Not just for a great moment in COVID. That's not why I'm here.
COVID is, there's so many similarities as far as these events that, I call them gifts. A friend of mine that I spoke to, in this capacity, we were talking about gifts, and, that COVID in a weird way was a gift for you. Because it created, you already had the capacity, but it created, it taught you a way to overcome and see even more opportunity and more need. And that's how I'm looking at it anyways. And it's all based on your mindset, perception, and how you use it. It's you can sit there and say, okay, well, I'm because of this, I'm this way because this happened to me. Meaning, this happened to me, so I'm messed up, or this happened to me, and this is how I am, right? On the positive side of it. So you can look at it negative or positive. It's whatever, however you want to look at it. Not doing it in a form of being I'm not naive to the fact that, we're going to still take some shots and it's going to be an emotional strain, but it's I got that muscle memory. I have that capacity to help.
Oh, totally. I call it, situational discomfort for maximum gain.
Right.
People will say, well, you must be so stressed out all the time. And I think, I really look at this as this is very situational discomfort. And if we're talking about something as important as generational change, I think it's going to be okay. Yeah. I'm going to be okay.
If it's different, discomfort isn't going to deter anything. In a way, you almost kind of get addicted to that, and that's when I get creative, is when there's something that
the best things happen in that moment.
It's okay,
that resistance, there's something about that resistance. That's just metaphor for life, right?
Yep.
But there's something about that, and that pushing through.
You said something, and it just popped in my head, because you talked about opening the doors for people, right? And you've heard the saying, hurt people hurt. And again, I'm putting empathy wise, putting myself in people's shoes. If I had to walk in there and say I can't feed my family,
Mhm.
right? I mean, that's hurt. I'm going to carry that probably with me
Forever.
forever, and carry that into every situation that I'm in with that shame or whatever. But
Hmm.
what you're doing by allowing dignity and humanity to prevail in situations like that is you're also allowing people to heal. And there's no reason why people healed people can't heal, right? So hurt people will build up walls. It's a way to protect themselves from getting hurt anymore. Healed people will build the doors in those walls and you can walk in. And so I think
Oh yeah, that's good.
what you're
Yeah.
doing is absolutely that. It's like, why can't I use what I've overcome and healed from to help other people heal? I just made a door there. There's a door over there. Let's run through that wall. We don't even have to make a door,
Yeah, I
right?
know. I know.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's, I'll say it again. I love what you're doing. I love your spirit. I love your heart. We exist to value and love people, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we act in the long-term best interest of another, right? That's our
Yeah.
mission. And so we're here to serve. Obviously, we do it in the form of mortgage. It's the ability to generate the most amount of money in the shortest amount of time through just based on the dollar amount to where we can create more and build more and help
I
more
just love
people.
that. That just makes sense, right? Like I've repeated that message that,
Yeah.
from that original talk that we had,
Yeah.
like I've repeated that to like I've been talking to everybody about you guys because it's just like, what a script flip, right? To have, the type of business you're in to give back in such a profound way.
Mm-hmm. it, we're in a recession apparently, right? I mean,
Yeah.
um, applications closing, everything down 65%. Albania and I are the busiest we've ever been,
Mm,
and it's because we're going out and making connections and helping people outside of this. I mean, again, the business aspect of the mortgage side is important because that's how we
mm-hmm,
build this stuff. But the
mm-hmm.
relationship stuff is way more important to us.
Yeah.
That's what fulfills us, and I know that's the same with you. Is building those relationships that we're making that impact, right? Like I said, we want to be the number one. Well, we are. I want to be the number one impact loan officer within the number one impact
Mm-hmm.
mortgage company in the world.
I love saying things out loud like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's a big thing, right? I mean, that's kind of exposing. Like,
Yes, it cements it. You got
but
to say it out loud.
I can tell you right now, no one, in my opinion, no one's going to have the capacity based on empathy that I have. I don't think that's why. I mean, it's not easy to do these every week, every other week, as far
Mm,
as and kind of exposing yourself emotionally.
mm,
But again, it's not about me. I have to someone's going to hear something that you and I said today that's going to impact them enough to where their life has changed, then it's worthwhile, right?
totally.
So can't I can't wait to see what's next. I mean, seriously, I'm
I,
excited. I'm
yeah.
excited for our relationship. I'm excited to see what we can do and how we can partner.
I'm
Um,
so incredibly appreciative. Like that, it is, like I said, a real lifeline in a moment that it was needed the most. So thank you for
well,
that.
we're happy we could be that for you, and yeah, I'm excited to see what comes. And again, I don't want to call out people. It sounds weird when you say I'm going to call you out, but I mean, if this is something that means something to you, if this is impacting you, if this is something that's resonating with you, reach out to Stacy or or I mean, go by, see the market, see what she's doing in our backyard. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's beautiful, amazing. So thank you.
Yeah, the door is open for all people. I would love to show anybody around and hear more about how people would like to get involved.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate you
you.
coming.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Did we talk for an hour and a half? Stop. It seemed like 20 minutes. Probably not to you, though, you poor thing.